Well, it's story time again. You're watching On the Mark with Mark. This is a story about a plane trip I took. A very short trip, but still it was eventful. In 1983, in December, I moved to Chicago. And I ended up living there for about 4 years. And during the time that I lived there, there were several commuter airlines that had started up. And they were Brit Airways, Mississippi Valley Airways, and there was at least one more. If there's another one, the name escapes me. But anyway, they had, and I find this hard to believe, it was $39 round trip fare from Chicago to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which was my hometown. So for $40, I could go home for the weekend, hang out with my old friends. So that was a pretty good deal. Now, I find it hard to believe, and my memory is pretty good, except for when it's not. So it might have been $49, but I think it was $39. It was cheap. Gas wasn't very expensive back then. You could drive it for a little bit less, but for just a little more, you could get Friday night in Cedar Rapids. So otherwise, you spent Friday night on the road, and then, of course, all evening Sunday night driving home, or sometimes I would catch the morning flight on Monday, and then I could be in the office usually by about 9 o'clock in Chicago. So still a pretty good deal. Well, one of the times when I was getting ready to fly home, I had my ticket, and when I got to the airport, they kept saying, Brit Airways flight such and such from Chicago to Moline with continuing service to St. Louis. And it was my flight number. And so I went up to the ticket agent and I said, hey, I've got this ticket for this plane, but you keep saying it's going to St. Louis. Now I'm going to Cedar Rapids. She said, yes, you will deplane in Moline and get on another plane, and that plane will take you to Cedar Rapids. So I'm like, okay. Well, several times they had called, our flight, and they never said anything about Cedar Rapids. So I was pretty nervous that I was probably going to end up in St. Louis. So Chicago to Moline, I looked online. I think it's 21 minutes of airtime. I mean, it is just bink, bink, and you're down again. Well, by the time you count, the time you get up in the air and you level off, and then the stewardess comes down with drinks if you want one, you got about 10 minutes to drink a drink. And I always would get a beer, So here's, I just left work. This flight probably left at 6 o'clock. So I'm on an empty stomach. So you got a pound of beer in 10 minutes. And I mean, as soon as she's down the aisle, she is coming back and picking them up. So you down this beer, and we get to Moline, and we land, and we're taxiing along the runway, and then the stewardess gets on the intercom. And now this is a really small plane. It's as big as a school bus. I mean, you can stand up in it, but it's got square sides. It's kind of a dopey looking thing. It's a turboprop, had Rolls-Royce engines on it. They had a really good safety record. The wing was over top, so the plane sort of hung below the wing. Nothing cool about this plane at all. Well, anyway, she gets on the intercom at the back of the plane, and she says, will the passenger transferring to Cedar Rapids please raise his hand? I'm like, are you kidding me? And I'm sitting in the front row. So I'm there and I'm like, yeah, that's me. I raised my hand up and I'm right by the window. And she says, well, I'd like to thank that passenger sitting next to you to get up and let you out as your transferring flight is waiting on the tarmac. And I'm like, just me? This plane could have flown straight to St. Louis if I didn't have to get off right here, because I don't see anybody getting on. And in fact, we didn't pull up to the gate or anything. So I get up and I'm walking down the aisle, and the stewardess is taken down. They have this cargo net at the back, and you could see everybody's bags right there. There's no checking any luggage on this airline. And she says, which one's your bag? Well, it was right there on top. I'm like, it's that one right there. And so she grabs it and she's like, this one? And the door was open. throws it out the door. I'm like, the heck? And I get to the door and I look, and there was the stewardess from my connecting flight was standing at the bottom of the stairs, and she catches my bag. Not a big bag. I mean, it's just for the weekend. And she's a little bitty thing, probably 120 pounds maybe. And she takes off running across the tarmac. And so there I am, I'm like 25, 24. And I'm not too keen on some woman carrying my bag. It's like, give me that bag. You don't need to do that. But she was fast. So I took off running after her. And these planes didn't get within, it was at least 100 yards. So we're in the 100-yard dash. And as we're running up to this other plane, same type of plane again, a little turboprop plane. We can see the plane sitting there and the engines aren't running. And then as we're getting closer, the engines start running on there. And she gets over to the steps to get into the plane, and she comes walking up, and the other stewardess is there, and they're putting my bag away, and I come up the steps, and I get in on the back of the plane. Everybody on that plane, hooray! Just waiting for me, and I'm like, what the heck? And so I come walking through trying to find a seat. Everybody's patting me on the back. I don't know how long they were waiting, but they were waiting for this one guy. Anyway, there I was, and so then now Moline to Cedar Rapids is another 21-minute flight. I mean, it's super short. So up in the air, level off, you got 10 minutes. Oh, here she comes again. Here's beer, this and that. So now I'm pounding 2 beers here in just a short amount of time on an empty stomach. And we land in Cedar Rapids. And my brother used to work near the airport. So if I was coming in on Friday night, then I would ask him to stay later, stop and pick me up at the airport. So I'm getting off of this airplane, and I'm like, 2 beers cannonballed on a Friday night on an empty stomach. I was feeling really good. I'm pretty sure I was staggering off of that plane. But that's my story. Just a little one there today, but I thought it was pretty fun. I wonder how long they were waiting. Thanks for listening to my story. You're watching On the Mark with Mark. Cheers.